How do I know what to do here? Or how do I know which path is right for me and my company? Or how do I know which decision is right? If these are questions you've ever asked or are asking now, stay tuned. We're going to talk all about it.
Running a service business can be hard. It is not unusual for business owners in industries like contracting, home repair, auto repair, business-to-business services like janitorial, IT and accounting, and many others to feel overwhelmed by all the priorities facing them at any given time. Between addressing the needs of the customers, managing the employees, figuring out the financials, and getting processes in place, feeling like you're making significant progress on your business journey can be difficult. Welcome to Service Industry Success, hosted by Brian Harding. Each week, Brian will look at real-world strategies for building the business you are dreaming of, while also sharing tactics to get through some of the most frustrating parts of business ownership with a lot more ease. Let's get started.
A few weeks back, I was talking to a client named Justin. Justin was having a difficult time deciding on how to create and word his employee handbook. He didn't want it to sound too harsh, but he didn't want to come across like the company would just be taken advantage of either. When he asked me how he should know what the intent and the language should sound like, I asked him if he had established his core values. He said he had not, and then very nicely asked me, what the heck has that got to do with anything? So I explained to him that one of the valuable things about establishing our core values is providing the guidelines for making difficult decisions, such as the one he was facing at this very moment with his employee handbook. So Justin agreed to spend a few days establishing his core values. Fast forward a couple weeks, and when I spoke to him, he had completed the task of writing the language he needed for his handbook, and with the help of his newly established core values, he was able to write the language he needed more easily, and perhaps more importantly, he was confident with the language he had chosen. So, if you've read any kind of book, if you've been to any kind of seminar in the last 15 or 20 years about running a business or owning a business, you've heard people talk about core values probably. What I don't think is always clear is what the real tangible benefit is for the business owner. Core values for some folks, especially folks who are more analytical, or a little more people who are a little more rough around the edges, or maybe a technician who came into building a business or starting their own company. Core values kind of sounds like a pie in the sky kind of thing that just doesn't make sense. And I get how it could sound like that and feel like that. However, there are real benefits to taking the time to do this. And one of them is making decisions easier because it reminds you here's what matters to me, right? So we're going to spend some time talking about how to do core values. This is not a big time-consuming exercise. For most folks, this is something you could pound out in an hour, probably, maybe two. Maybe a little bit longer if you have a big team of people you want to do this with. But this is not a big time-consuming thing. In my opinion, being clear about your core values can save you a number of hours in just wondering if you're doing the right thing. Just the number of hours you'll save just pondering that as you're trying to sleep or you're driving down the road or whatever. I think it's just a great investment of time just for that reason, if nothing else. And there's plenty of other benefits that come from it as well. Also, just want to point out, you can tell by the way I stutter and stammer sometimes, we're not editing these episodes. This is just how I am. So hopefully it's not too much of a distraction to keep up with. But obviously we're not editing these things. I want to make a point to make these things as real as possible. I don't want them to sound canned. So the downside is sometimes you're going to hear me stutter and blunder my way through some things. Anyhow, back to our core values. The first step with developing your core values is really just figuring out, are you going to do this alone? Or if you have a team of people, what degree is the team going to be involved with helping create this? So depending on where your business is at, there's times where both are appropriate. I would say if you have employees on board that you trust and you believe in and you see as really being a part of your future, the future of the company, and they have your and the company's best interests at heart, absolutely, I think it makes sense to have the employees on board with creating that. If you're just starting out and you're by yourself, of course, there is nobody else, so it's going to be you. if you've got a couple of people on board, but you just don't know if they're going to be long-term players, if they have any kind of commitment to the company or visions of being with the company for a long time, you may want to temper their involvement. You may want to just do this on your own and present it rather than having the team on board. It really depends on how committed you feel like your team is. If you have more than, I would say, 4 or 5 employees, I don't think you have a choice but to get your team involved. It's going to feel very awkward for you to present this if you have a fairly large number of employees already. So that's the first step. And then we get into the actual task of creating these core values. We just have to determine the 3 to 7 character traits and values that matter most to you or your group if you're going to do it as a group. And I'm talking about things like honesty, integrity, grit. You can do a quick online search and get a whole list of positive human characteristics or potential core values. There's a ton of ways you can look these up. You'll get a list of probably 50 or 75 or so to pick from. It's a pretty easy if you're just like stymied and you can't figure out what direction to go with this. It's pretty easy to find a list to start drawing from. You might also consider quality and safety characteristics, as in actively preventing accidents or actively reducing warranty work. If those things are crucial to separating your company from the competition or making your company stand out in your industry, those are certainly things that you could incorporate. Also, performance and growth. Those might be things that you factor in for your team as well. If performance and growth are part of your top 3 to 7 things you want to focus on and your company is going to be all about, then by all means, those should be in those core values. This really needs to represent what your company is about so that you, your employees, your customers, your suppliers, everybody could see this and know immediately what matters to you. And when we talk about like what matters to you, you're going to know. You will know what matters to you. And I think that one of the things that you can do to ensure that you're being super honest and super on point with this is not allowing yourself multiple hours to get this done. If you're doing it by yourself, give yourself 30 minutes to pound it out, maybe an hour tops. If you've got a group of 3 people, same thing, 30 minutes to an hour. If you're going to bring in a large group of people, if you're going to bring in, let's say you have a company that's, 75 people and you're going to bring in 8 to 10 people to get a good representation of all of your employees. It might be a couple of hours, maybe 3, maybe 4, but I would not allow it to go beyond that. The longer you allow this to take, the less the less on point I think you take a chance of things being. Likely the hardest part of the whole thing is limiting yourself to 7 or less. I would generally recommend no more than 5. I know that's really hard for some people, so I say no more than 7. 5 as a max would be ideal. If you could get down to 3, I think that's even better. We want this to be a complete list, but we're not trying to create an all-inclusive list here. We're saying out of the dozens of very good characteristics out there, these are the most important to us. And that's why I think the faster you do this, the more your gut is telling you what matters to you. And you don't start questioning yourself and start saying, well, this should matter rather than this does matter. I think that's a very important distinction to keep on top of. Once you've identified those characteristics, you can begin writing them out in sentences. So they will just start describing what's important to you in your company. And these sentences are almost going to sound like affirmations. And this is where for people who are kind of, who feel like this is kind of a pie in the sky kind of thing, who don't believe in these kinds of affirmations, this is part of what makes it seem kind of squishy and not, and just, I don't know, pie in the sky is kind of the best word I can come up with for it for people who are just kind of put off by this idea. But these affirmations do matter. Reminding ourselves and publishing and posting, here's what matters for me and my organization. This will help. There are benefits to doing this. So we want to write these sentences out that sound like affirmations. And here's kind of what they might sound like. And again, you make this how you want it to sound. This is not about me telling you what your characteristics should be, your core values should be, what should matter, how the sentences should sound. This is 100% you make it what you want it to sound like. But here's some examples for people who have just never done this before and don't have any idea what this is supposed to sound like. Here's some things that it might sound like. One of your sentences might sound like, we will conduct ourselves with integrity at all times. Again, just an affirming statement that when people read this, they know that integrity matters to you. It might be something like, we will work with grit and fierce determination while also maintaining our strong commitment to preventing accidents. That one obviously talks about striking a balance between pushing yourselves while still providing a safe work environment. Obviously, those things are beneficial. Obviously, those are things that many companies would say, hey, that's really important. We want to push ourselves, but we're not going to push ourselves so hard that we're not safe anymore. If that's what matters to you, then let's say it, right? One of the things I would be a complete, absolute stickler about is staying away from the words try, attempt, or anything like that. Those kinds of words automatically give your team and you an out anytime you miss the mark. And that essentially defeats the purpose of creating your core values to begin with. If you're going to try to do something, that's not the same thing as doing something. I don't know. I think it just completely gives you an out. If you or someone on your team is completely being a jerk and they're being called out for not behaving in line with your core values, all you got to do is say, well, hey, I was trying. And it just defeats the whole purpose. So that's not what we're trying to do here. I would make a commitment if you're doing this with a group right up front before you even get started. These are the words we're not going to use. Try, attempt, any other versions that you can think of. Take those completely out. Leaving those in is going to be counterproductive, and later down the road, it's going to lead to counterproductive, confusing conversations that are just a waste of time. So let's avoid those. And I would recommend keeping the statements positive. Let's say what we're going to do rather than what we're not going to do, right? We are going to conduct ourselves with integrity at all times versus we're going to avoid not having integrity. We want these to be affirming statements. We want them to be positive. We want people to feel good when they say them as employees and when they read them as customers or suppliers or people coming into our organization. And these are just these are statements of affirmations. We're making ourselves, the company, the team, you're saying this is what we are, and you're putting it out there. You want to be proud of this. Let's make these very positive statements. The next thing is we have to get that. If you have a team, if you have employees on board, whether or not they help you write these things. And again, I would lean towards having your team help you write them, unless again you just have a couple of employees and you just don't see them as being long-term players. We got to get our team to commit to these core values or make adjustments necessary so that they will commit to them. If your team will not commit to these core values, they're worthless. They just don't matter. If you're not going to be able to all agree upon this is what we are and this is a standard we're going to hold each other to, then this whole exercise is pointless. And the last thing is, let's post these core values in the most conspicuous place you can find. If you're going to use these things to make decisions with, keep them in a place where it's easy to reference. If you're going to explain to an employee or remind yourself what the core values of the company are and what you're committed to, let's have them in a place that's visible and be bold about how we present them. Let's not be shy about this is what we're about. This is who we are. This is what matters to us. And then when you're going through things like my friend Justin was going through with writing the handbook, you can look at these things and go, yeah, here's the top 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 things that matter to us. When I'm writing my language needs to reflect that. And I know it sounds silly in some cases, but it really does make it easier, and we can be more confident with what we end up with because we've made decisions through this lens of what guides our company, what we're all about. When all else fails, here's what matters to us. And that makes things a lot easier. So the first step is to recognize the value of doing this. Like most of the things we talk about, the first step is just understanding this is a great benefit. This is something worth doing. And acknowledging how much easier it is to make decisions when you have this lens through which to view the challenges you're going to face. You're going to face challenges. You're going to have plenty of things where you just don't know what the right thing to do is. If you have this lens to look through, it just makes things a lot easier and you can be more confident with what you end up with. So Step one, to summarize, decide you're going to do this. Again, alone with your team. That's the first step, figuring out who's going to be involved. Step two, determine the 3 to 7 character traits and values that matter the most to you. Again, these may be focused around performance or accident prevention or just human characteristics that matter to you. Step 3, once you have them identified, you can begin writing them out in sentences that will sound like affirmations. So they will begin to describe what is important to you and your company, and people can easily see what you're all about. And again, when all else fails, here's what matters to us. We're going to stay away from words like try and attempt, and we're going to keep these statements positive. Step 5, post these core values in the most conspicuous place you can find. If you have a lobby, put them there. If you have a lobby and a warehouse, put them in both places. Like, we do not want this to be hidden. We want to be bold about how we present these things. And then once we have them in place, we got to hold ourselves, our team, our suppliers, and even our customers to these standards that you've developed. If they don't apply to anyone, if they don't apply to everyone, they can't apply to anyone. That's a really important thing to understand with core values. Either they matter for everyone or they can't matter for anyone. And this is going to be really important when you face employee challenges where people are just behaving in a way that's not in line with your core values. You have to address it, because once you have these core values in place and once exceptions are made, they're moot. And we just have to avoid that. So this is why we pick things that really matter to us, that we will defend all the way till the end. This is something, a line in the sand I'm not willing to cross. Here's what matters to me. So that's why core values are important. That's the benefit you get out of it. That's why I think it's a great investment. And along with determining what you're trying to build, core values is right up there for making your life easier, because you have a framework to work within. You have a goal with the vision of what you're trying to build, and the core values is kind of the rules by which you're going to operate. And I just think it's a great tool for a variety of things that will save you a ton of lost sleep for sure. So that's it for this week. As always, if you know of somebody who's a business owner in the service industry, a friend or a colleague who could benefit from this podcast, we sure appreciate you passing it along. If you have a couple minutes, give us a rating and a review. If you could spare a little bit of time for that, that would be fantastic. Other than that, thanks for your time again, as always. I hope you guys are having a great week, and talk to you soon.